Hi, my name is Richard Cooper. I fly the MiG-15. I started flying and got my license in 1973. Flew planes for about 3 years and then got a commercial license. At that time, I was still interested in all forms of aviation, and in 1986 got a helicopter license and have flown helicopters and airplanes since then. Approximately 15 years ago, I got interested in aviation from an air show aspect and was president of the Canadian International Air Show. I had the opportunity and pleasure to be able to meet an Air Force general who, when I explained my love of aviation, was able to secure a ride for me and an opportunity to fly an F-15 Eagle. So for an hour and 10 minutes, I got to fly an amazing aircraft which actually changed my life. After flying that aircraft, I realized that I had to get into something a little more quick than some of the stuff that I was used to flying. So I basically looked around at different aircraft and narrowed it down to an Aerovachotsky L-29. I did an engine conversion on it and put a Rolls-Royce Viper engine in it, so it gave it even more power. I flew that for a little while and then realized that there was something else. I needed something a little more. So I looked around at a bunch of different aircraft. One of the things I thought about was the fact that I liked the simplicity of the Russian aircraft, the fact that the maintainability was very much easier and a lot more reliable. I was looking around for, a reliable aircraft, something that was simple. Like a lot of the Russian stuff. I mean, if you look at it, the canopy on this, right? It's a clamshell canopy, so it basically you unlock the canopy and you lift it up. There's nothing to go wrong with that. You look at the T-33, a hydraulic canopy, right? There's a lot to go wrong with that. A lot of extra systems, a lot more mechanics, a lot more maintenance, hence more complexity, more maintenance, less reliable, right? Very reliable aircraft. Same as the L-29. Very reliable aircraft. I mean, I would arrive at air shows where other aircraft are, got a problem, and I'm still able to fly because mine still works, right? So that was one of the reasons I looked at it. I was looking for something that was reliable, fun to fly. But basically it was reliable. I mean, there's no sense in having an aircraft that, they break down a lot of the times, right? There's a lot of maintenance on them. So you want something that's going to be fairly reliable. So that was the reason why. And both my aircraft have 2 seats. Like, people have always asked me, would you buy a single seat airplane? I've never owned a single seat aircraft because I always like going with somebody else. So I could have bought a MiG-17. I had contemplated actually, I looked at a MiG-21 was the first thing, but there's nowhere to land them in Canada. I shouldn't say nowhere. The places you can land them in Canada, you can count on the fingers on one hand almost, right? So I ruled that out. I looked at a MiG-17, but there's very, very few MiG-17 two-seaters. So that was a challenge, and most of them are Chinese. So I was more looking for an aircraft that was really built in Russia. I looked at the MiG-17, but it has an afterburner as well. So I would be looking at a single-seat aircraft with an afterburner, and I didn't really want the afterburner. And a friend said, "Why not?" I said, "Well, an afterburner goes through an awful lot of fuel." He said, "Well, you don't have to use it." I said, "Do you know me? I mean, if it's there, I'm going to use it." And the problem is it goes through a lot of fuel. I mean, a ton of fuel. These aircraft on their own go through an awful lot of fuel. So through the process, I looked at it, and I started looking for the historical aspect of things, which is something I like as well. And if you look at it for the history, the era of the swept-wing jet fighter started with the MiG-15. It showed up over the skies of Korea in 1950, and nobody on this side of the fence knew it was coming. So that's kind of where the era started, and it took a while for North America to catch up with the MiG-15. We had the F-86, but it was several marks down the road before they actually started to catch up to the MiG-15. So that historical aspect of it kind of captivated my interest as well. That, in a sense, also associated with the fact that the Russian equipment is very, very reliable. It's very simple in design. They don't add a lot of extra stuff that's not necessary. They put in what's necessary. The stuff that isn't, they don't bother. So the aircraft itself just operates. It's built like a tank. It really is. It's a very, very durable aircraft. I mean, fellows who flew it, I had the fortune to meet and still am friends with a fellow who lives here who flew MiG-15s, but it was in the Czech Republic. But he still was flying a MiG-15. And he said, you know, young guys would climb in the aircraft, they'd jump up on the end of the wing and walk up on the wing. I can't do that. But the fact of the matter is you can. The wing is so solid. It's unbelievable. It's the amount of engineering gone into this aircraft that has been almost over-designed to the point where it is like literally built like a tank. It's a very impressive aircraft. It's a fun aircraft to fly. It's got its certain areas where you have to be very careful with it, as with any swept-wing aircraft. But it's, you know, if you pay attention, you study the numbers and you follow the guidelines on the aircraft, it's a beautiful flying airplane. I've never had anybody in the aircraft that hasn't had a marvelous time flying in it. I've got some friends around the countryside that operate aircraft. I've also got some friends, as the one I was speaking about earlier, who's from the Czech Republic. They still have some MiG-15s around there. I'm always looking around for parts, but so far I have not had a problem getting parts. Sometimes maybe it's a little bit of a delay. Maybe it's 2-3 months or whatever, but I haven't needed a lot of parts, but I'm always on the lookout. This particular aircraft has been converted. I'm not sure if you know that I converted the brakes on this aircraft. The brakes on this are the same as the L-29. They're a pneumatic. They were a pneumatic system, which is an air system, it was a drum brake system. So you would squeeze the handle on the stick, and it would divert air down to the wheels, depending on which pedal you pushed in. So it was differential, and that would brake the aircraft with these drum brakes. I actually found that that's the one system, and I don't look at it as a flaw in the aircraft, because you got to realize this aircraft was designed in the 1940s. It's 1940s technology, so that braking system was used worldwide. But now with the different availability of engineering and that, I was able to take the discs off of a T-33, and I incorporated the dual disc system off of the T-33 and plumbed in a hydraulic system. So I actually have hydraulic brakes on the aircraft. So now it will stop very, very quickly. That's the one area where it was never a big design problem when they built the aircraft, because they had lots and lots of open fields to land on. You're landing on grass and you've got 10,000 feet to land on. It didn't matter whether you stopped in 6,000 feet or 8,000 feet. Unfortunately, especially with Canada, we're limited here with the number of long runways. So for me, being able to stop at a much quicker distance is a huge advantage. Plus, being able to go to air shows and be able to land on a 5,000-foot runway instead of a 7,000-foot runway is a huge advantage. So that was the reason for the conversion. This particular aircraft I bought off a fellow, Ray Weibel, in the United States. He imported the aircraft and then did a lot of restoration work on it. And you can see the aircraft in itself is in very, very good shape. When I bought it from him, he had done a lot of work on restoring the aircraft, and then unfortunately lost his license, wasn't able to fly the aircraft, so I purchased it, brought it up I flew it for a number of years in the US, operating flawlessly. I did air shows with it, and then finally imported it into Canada. During the import to Canada, the aircraft was completely disassembled. We took it apart, like right down as far as we possibly could, including the engine, to check over every aspect of it, and then put it all back together again. The areas where it was noted in the manuals to watch out for certain problems or whatever, we looked for them. Some of them we did find, some of them we didn't. And I mean, in the sense that there weren't a problem there. The ones that indicated areas where there might be a problem, rubbing on maybe a fuel line, we did actually find that. So the actual disassembly of the aircraft was well worth the time and the cost, because we were able to fix and repair any of those problems. So at this point, this particular aircraft is probably one of the finest flying examples of a MiG-15 in the world today. biggest expense with operating this aircraft is the fuel. I mean, the engine design is the early stage 1 jet engines, so they're not fuel efficient at all. Basically, I'm looking at about almost $3,000 an hour to operate the airplane with fuel and the maintenance. It takes a regular Jet A that you'd find in any jet aircraft or any jet helicopter. Yeah, it's in that sense it's very available. Well, I wish it was tons more and the price had come down. It'd be much better if I could get some cheaper jet fuel, because that's probably that is the one thing it is the limiting factor for me to operate the aircraft. I would fly the aircraft a lot more. Like, I enjoy it. Like today, I had an incredibly enjoyable flight. It's one of the longest flights, not the longest flight, but one of the longest flights I've done recently. When I purchased this aircraft, I bought it in Reno, Nevada, and basically flew it from Reno, Nevada back to here, which in itself was a very exciting trip. I mean, it's pretty much almost across the country, Reno, Nevada being almost on the west coast. I did 6 hops to get it here because we're a little bit range limited. The aircraft really was never designed with a long range to it. So I would have to end up planning airports that were within the range of my typical planning is about 330 nautical miles, what I would usually plan. So I'd look for an airport that had to have jet fuel, the runway had to be long enough, and I needed a 1,000 amp GPU, a ground power unit, to start it. So I needed those criteria, and sometimes I would have to sacrifice on the distance. I'd only maybe be able to go 250 nautical miles instead of 330 or whatever. So it worked out, but I took 6 hops to get it back. Yeah, it's a fun aircraft to fly. It really is. It loves going fast. Not too happy going slow. It starts to get a little. I mean, you can notice it as soon as you're coming in on approach, and you start slowing down. You start seeing the wings dipping like this, back and forth, rocking, letting you know, don't go much slower. Don't go much slower. But once it gets going, I tell you, it hops up pretty quick. I mean, the other aircraft here aren't really much of a match for it. There's no doubt about it. The MiG is definitely the fastest.
So biggest factor you have to watch is speed.
Speed. There's a few little tricks to the aircraft. A lot of people, I mean, and I'm not sure why people don't understand it, but the aircraft wants to take off very, very early, and you can't let it. It wants to climb up very quickly. So one of the sort of little tricks to flying the aircraft is there's a white line on the dashboard, and on the cockpit door on the wall, that's where the stick goes, and you hold it. If you have any trouble with the aircraft, if you get into an unusual condition where you've got an unusual circumstance, the stick goes right up against that white line. It also goes right there for takeoff. Hold it until you get up to about 105 knots, and then you can ease off the pressure and let the nose wheel come up, and then the aircraft will start climbing off. If you do that, you're not going to have a problem. If you don't, the airplane will nose up and will roll pretty quickly to the right or the left, and you're going to have a problem. Very unforgiving that way. But we're talking about a swept wing aircraft, right? This has got a -3 degree dihedral. It's a 35 degree swept wing. I mean, it's a high performance aircraft. It was designed to take off and climb up very, very quickly. It used to be armed originally with 137 millimeter cannon and 223 millimeter cannons. It had an awful lot of firepower. It could get to altitude very, very quickly and then do what it had to do and then come back. So it's a very impressive aircraft.